What's up, airplane collectors? Welcome to another model review. It's your host Ray. In today's video, I'll be reviewing the Gemini 200 Southwest Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 8. This video is being made at the request of one of my subscribers who asked that I review this model after seeing it in my massive unboxing episode 2. So if you have a model that you see in my collection that you'd like me to review, by all means comment down below and I'll get that out shortly. This video will go something like this. First, I'll talk about the box, then the model itself, and at the end of the video, I'll give my personal opinion about whether or not I recommend the model to other collectors, and that'll be the review. So let's get this started. So the box is the standard Gemini 200 narrow body box. It's 13 centimeters lengthwise, 13 centimeters tall, and about 8.5 centimeters wide. And I'll show you around the box now. So here's the front, bottom, right side, top, left side, and the back side. If you have anything you'd like to read back here, feel free to do that. Once you open up the box, you get the model, you get two options for landing gear configuration, and you get the display stand. The display stand comes disassembled, and once you assemble it, it's a really cheap and flimsy stand. Half of the time it doesn't even fit into the model right, and that's the case with this one. The stand doesn't fit into the model. So if you want to display this model on a display stand, I highly suggest buying another stand alongside the model, because the stand that Gemini provides is just terrible. As for landing gear configuration options, you get the extended position or the retracted position. Right now I have the landing gear in the extended position, but I will demonstrate what the retracted position looks like later in the video. Before I start the review, I'll give you a quick 360 of the model. The model is 20 centimeters long in terms of fuselage length. The wingspan is 18 centimeters, and from the ground to the top of the vertical stabilizer, it's 6.5 centimeters tall. Accurate to 1 to 200 scale, fairly large, and also heavy because the model is made primarily out of die-cast metal. We'll start up the review at the front of the aircraft. Here we can see the nose section of the fuselage. The nose shape and profile looks really good. It's made very nicely, and there's plenty of printed detail up at the front of the aircraft, and I have no complaints so far. Moving down the fuselage, you can see the huge Southwest logo looks good. All the windows, exit doors, everything looks good in terms of just overall detail. Lots of printed details, lots of markings, lots of colors, all of which look fantastic. Here's the left side of the vertical stabilizer. This looks pretty good as well. I have no complaints. Shape looks good. There's a decent amount of molded detail there, and the colors look like they're applied very nicely. I'll show you the right side of the aircraft. It's basically identical to the left side, so I won't provide much commentary. If my camera would focus, that is. There's a lot of printed detail here on the right side as well, and all of it looks pretty solid, so I have no complaints. Moving on to the wings. The wings on this model are very nicely detailed with a combination of printed and molded detail. No complaints on either of them. I really don't see any issues with the details on the wing. Paint looks good. There's even a bit of reflective There's a bit of reflective paint on the forward slats, and that looks pretty good. The bottom of the wings have a lot of molded detail as well. However, they don't have any printed detail, but there's not very much to look at down here anyway. Here's the scimitar winglet on the left wing. The winglets on both sides, the scimitar tips on both sides look pretty good. There's a lot of detail on them. The paint is applied very nicely. This little white spot here, originally I thought it was a mistake, but this is actually a detail that's supposed to be there. So that looks really nice. I appreciate the inclusion of that. And I have no complaints on the scimitar tips. They're made very nicely, and I'm usually very picky about winglets, so they're done very nicely. Now here's the rear section of the aircraft. Here we can see the horizontal and vertical stabilizers and the APU, all of which look pretty good. The horizontal stabilizers don't really have any printed detail on them. They have plenty of molded detail, which looks really good. I noticed no mistakes or issues to mention. The same deal with the bottom side, no printed detail, but plenty of detail in terms of molded detail. Looks pretty good. The APU also looks really good. There's no dent or hole for the exhaust. However, there is a little bit of a black spot there to represent the exhaust hole, and it looks pretty solid. The reflective paint also looks really good back here as well. Now it's time for the engines. The engines on this model look fantastic. There's plenty of printed detail on them, and their shape looks pretty good as well. You can kind of see the nozzle might be pointed ever so slightly downward, however I'm not 100% sure. The engine pylons also look pretty solid, and I'll show you some of that printed detail I was talking about. You can see the bottom of the right engine here. It's got a ton of printed detail. It looks pretty good. I don't have any complaints on there. And the little extra I'm not sure what that is. The little extra flap on the inboard side of the engine is painted white like on the real airplane, which is definitely a nice detail. The fan blades on this model look fantastic. There's no fan blade detail or paint or anything like that, but these fan blades do spin, and they spin rather freely on this model, or very freely on this model, so you can blow into the engines and the fan blade should spin. Same deal with the right side. This one's a bit more stiff, but it still spins regardless. So very nicely done on the engines. Here's the bottom side of the aircraft, and it looks pretty good. There's a lot of detail down here, both printed and painted detail. There's not really any molded detail down here, but there's not really much to mold down here either, so I can't complain about that too much. And yeah, here's what it looks like. I have no complaints and not very many comments. Now I'd like to discuss aerial features. This model does feature both sat domes and antennas. On the top of the aircraft, there are 2 antennas, and at the bottom there are 3, and at the top there is also a sat dome, which I will discuss right now. So there's this large antenna at the top of the aircraft, looks good, no complaints. Sat dome shape looks pretty good, and the printing on it or around it looks good. It aligns pretty much perfectly from the looks of it, and yeah, it's pretty solid. And there's a small antenna back here that looks to be a little bit bent forward, however, it really isn't that much, and alignment for it also looks pretty solid. At the bottom of the aircraft, there are actually 4 antennas. There aren't 3. There are 3 large antennas, 1, 2, and 3, all of which look good. Alignment is good, no complaints on those. And there's a very small one at the rear section of the aircraft back here. This looks good. It's made very nicely. It's attached to the aircraft good, and I have no complaints on that either. The landing gear on this model, they're pretty nice. They're very nicely detailed. There are a few things that I'll mention shortly that I do have to complain about, but they're made very nicely overall. The wheels roll very smoothly, and there's plenty of detail to go around them, so that's nice. Here's the nose gear. Nose gear is also very nice. It doesn't rotate or anything, but it does. The wheels do roll, so that's a nice touch. Looks very good. No complaints. Both sets of landing gear attach to the model through a system of magnets. The main gear attach rather loosely, actually, and you can actually see that I put foam covers on them on the rear section of the landing gear to balance that out, because if I didn't put those foam covers, if the foam covers weren't there, the main landing gear likes to bend backwards when the model's sitting on the ground, and it just doesn't look very good. But aside from that, they still fit on pretty nicely. Nose gear is also attached through magnets, and here's what it looks like. So pretty interesting. It's pretty modern. I do like the addition of magnets, but the main gear is pretty loose. Here is the retracted configuration for the landing gear. These covers are made of mostly plastic, except for the nose cover, I believe. That one's made out of die-cast metal, and they attach very smoothly to the aircraft. It's very impressive the way Gemini did this. They look very good. They attach uniformly to the aircraft. They conform to the surface very well, and they fit tight. They won't fall out. Like the next generation 737s. The nose gear cover is a little bit it's not the best. It doesn't go in all the way, but it's still very good, and it's more than acceptable compared to what other companies have done with other models. So overall, both landing gear configuration options are very solid, and they attach to the model very nicely, except for the issues with the main landing gear kind of falling back and the issue with the nose gear cover here. Here's a front view of the aircraft. Here we can see wing flex and gear balance. The wing flex for both the main wings and the horizontal stabilizers looks pretty good. Gear balance is rather questionable. You can see the aircraft leaning towards the left side of the aircraft or the right side of your screen. But once I was able to test the aircraft without the landing gear, I found no issues in alignment with cockpit window printing, which looks pretty solid. It aligns with the fuselage very nicely. So aside from the gear balance issue, that's the only complaint I have. Everything else looks pretty solid. And with that, the review is over. No time for my personal opinion. I'm just going to say it right here, right now. The model is damn near perfect. It's really good. As you heard throughout the video, I said no complaints multiple times because usually I criticize every little thing. However, there was very little to criticize on this model, except for the landing gear and the gear balance. That's really the only criticism I have for this model. So do I recommend it to other collectors? Absolutely. If you ever find this model somewhere, which it's pretty hard to find nowadays, get it. Make sure you inspect it though, because quality control has been a little bit spotty, with a few examples having a bit worse gear balance and just broken parts. But overall, Gemini did very, very good on this model, which is very impressive for Gemini since their quality control has been down the drain recently. So it's a stunning release by Gemini. Highly recommend it to any collector who can get their hands on it. And that's my opinion on it. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other models you'd like me to review, like I said earlier, drop that down below and I'll get that reviewed as soon as possible. And that's all I really have to say. Like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more model airplane and siren content. And I'll see you in my next video. Take care.